Open our hearts, Lord. Let's make that our prayer. I invite you to take a deep breath with me. That's one is as much for me as it is for you in this moment. Wisdom from the wilderness. I love these stories of the wilderness. Part of it is because the Israelites wandered for 40 years in the Sinai desert. But here's the thing. It's only a 3 to 4 hour car ride across the whole Sinai wilderness. But it took them 40 years to get across it. I guess it's like the saying goes, it takes as long as it takes. Now, to be fair, the term 40 years or the term 40 in our scriptures usually just means a long time. 40 days and 40 nights, 40 years, just a long time. Because when you're in the wilderness, time is surreal. Time is not, or doesn't at least feel like normal time. In the wilderness, that tough, arid, unforgiving place, many of us are in different kinds of wildernesses, like depression or unemployment, the wilderness of grief and loss, or perhaps physical pain. Sometimes our wildernesses are situational. Sometimes we've brought them on ourselves, and sometimes they've been imposed on us, like the wilderness of this pandemic, the one we've been in for 40 years now, a long time. And then, of course, there's the actual physical wilderness, the wilderness of refugee camps, the forced migrations of people because of climate change. We think of the people parched, many of them dying, trying to cross the desert, to cross borders to a better life. This story that Burrow read for us parallels so many of our own experiences, and there's so much wisdom and strength that we can draw from our own experience. So the text says that the whole congregation, the whole community of Israelites, journeyed by stages. And that's certainly what this feels like, journeying by stages. What it really feels like is 2 steps forward, 1 step back. We take 2 steps forward, there's a vaccine, and then we hear, oh, there's a variant. Oh, we're moving into the red tier, and oh no, now we're back in the purple tier. Just when we start to have hope and see light at the end of the tunnel, then there's news of a possible new surge in the future with the variants. We journey by stages. You know, early on in the pandemic, you remember when everyone was stockpiling toilet paper? We should have stockpiled patience and resilience, because those shelves are feeling a little empty right now, aren't they? The people camped, but there was no water. And it makes sense that water is featured in many of these stories since it was a desert. But 2 chapters before this, at an earlier stage of the journey, the people got to Marah, and there was water to drink, but the water was bitter, and they complained, and so God told Moses, throw this piece of wood into the water, and Moses did, and the water became sweet. And then we heard last week how the people said there's no food. So God sent manna, daily manna, as Cheryl reminded us, God's gift for us to take it one day at a time. But now, there is no water at all. Survival is at stake, because the reality of living in the wilderness was setting in. Water is even more vital than food. Drinkable water is life-giving. Ask the people in Flint, Michigan. Water is survival. Ask the people in Texas who were told, boil your water, and they replied, we have no water. At this time, this moment, many around the world are water insecure. And a whole sermon could be preached on the politics of water and what we are called to as people of faith. But today, I imagine that most of us listening in this wilderness of the pandemic, that what we're thirsting for is the life-giving water of relationships, of social connection, of human connection. We're thirsting for the life-giving touch. I'm thirsting for people to fill these pews where I can hug you and smile at you, where we can go to coffee hour and where you eat all the cookies before I even get there. I'm longing for that. Because our connection with one another is survival. That's why solitary confinement is the cruelest of tortures. Like water, now hear me, like water, human connection is a real need. The people quarreled with Moses. They grumbled. It was a difficult time. In fact, in the Hebrew, it's even stronger. The word used is from the language of the courts. The people brought a case against Moses. Did you bring us out here from Egypt? Did you bring us out in the wilderness to kill our children and our livestock? They doubted Moses' leadership, the one who they followed. They doubted his intentions even. And they complained. You know, Cheryl reminded us last week that we can complain to God, that God can not only hear it, but God can hold it. And I loved that. It really spoke to me because I'm kind of from the school of just deal with it. And I loved that we were invited to complain to God. And I think there's a difference between complaining about a want and a need. I think when you complain about a want, it's kind of like entitlement. But complaining about a need, a real need. So sometimes I think it's okay to complain together. God, when? When are we done with this? When can we be back together? When can we love on people like we're used to? When can we share meals without masks? The people were thirsty. It was a pressing need, and they went to their leader for help. You know, it doesn't seem that the people turned to God. They expected Moses to do that. Maybe they hadn't learned that needed lesson yet, that they themselves needed to trust, that they themselves could ask for God's help. And think about it for a minute. God had done huge miracles with water in the recent past. After all, think of the story of the parting of the Red Sea. There was an abundance of water, and now there wasn't a single drop. God had just made the water sweet. God had provided manna. But the Israelites, like many of us, me at least, I think are spiritual amnesiacs. Our faith memory fails us at times. But here's the truth. When we become desperate, it's difficult to trust. When we feel despair, sometimes we don't even have enough energy to trust. We're so deep in it that we can't look up or look out. Moses went to God for help. And I love this. God said, go ahead of the people. Really, the text says go in front of them. Basically, God was saying to Moses, face your people's need. And take witnesses with you. And take the staff in your hand, the same one that you used to strike the Nile because you already have the tools that you need. We have the tools that we need. Think about it for a minute. A year ago, none of us imagined what we would have been through. Some of you out there listening, some of us didn't even know what Zoom was. And yet, with the tools that we have, we've made it work. We've made a way. God said, go to the Rock of Horeb. And God instructs Moses to look at the very landscape that had engendered the fear. Look at the arid wilderness, and you can still find life-giving water. Because remember, Moses knew this wilderness. This is where he had previously spent years in exile. And here's the wonderful thing. Horeb is the place where Moses met God at the burning bush. The place where God said, I will meet you. I will be in front of you. That is the same place where Moses was promised years ago, I will be with you. I am that I am. It's the place that would shape his life. And Moses returned to that place to remember who he was, to remember his initial encounter with God, to remember the promises that were made. A promise not that the path would be easy, but that no matter what life brought, no matter what life brought, that presence would be unwavering. I will be with you. Life is harsh sometimes. Life is hard sometimes. Some of us are dealt really difficult hands to play in life. But the promise is unwavering, no matter our own ups and downs. And there are plenty of days, beloved, when it doesn't feel like that. I know. Though our circumstances and emotions and situations change, the presence does not change. And we can draw life sustenance and life-sustaining energy and strength from that presence. The Rock of Horeb. The place where the water came and the place where the bush that didn't burn. You can see this rock here. This is a special rock. Kay Harris brought this rock as a gift to Phil Lind, who loves geology. And this rock she got at St. Catherine's Monastery, which is built on the site of Horeb, where Moses saw the burning bush. So here we are, millennia later, perhaps with the same energy in this rock, the energy of God's presence here with us in our wilderness, in our time, reminding us that there is life-sustaining power. The seeming impossible becomes the possible. Having lived through the HIV pandemic, it took over a decade for life-saving medication to ebb the terrible toll of death from HIV/AIDS. And here we are, not even quite a year out. And many of you, I know, have already had at least one vaccine. The impossible became the possible. It's been almost a year And you know what? You all have kept showing up. You've kept engaged. I can't tell you what that means to those of us trying to do this every week, that you show up and that it means something and that we remain connected. As the poet says, don't say there is no water. Don't say there is no water to solace the dryness of our hearts. I have seen the fountain springing out of the rock wall and you drinking there. Don't say there is no water. It is still there and always there, with its quiet song and its strange power to spring within us up and out through the rock. Moses named the place Massa and Meribah, meaning the people quarreled and they tested God. The Israelites were always memorializing things, always naming things. And as I reflected on that this week, I thought, we need to memorialize this time once we're through it. We need to maybe etch on our wall of remembrance in the memorial garden a tribute to those whose lives were lost and a tribute to those who worked so hard to save lives. Perhaps we should have an artist make a sculpture to put out there that says CCSM made it through the first pandemic in 1918, made it through the second pandemic in 2020. The story ends. Is the Lord among us or not? I leave you to reflect on that question. What persuades you that there is a divine presence with you in this pandemic wilderness? Can you right in this moment say, I am not alone. I am not alone. God, I claim your presence. Because all of us, we're going to journey stage by stage, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. It's still progress. And it takes as long as it takes. But we will get there together. Amen.